Hi everyone, this is Dr. Arthur Hatton. I'm a clinical psychologist and a visual artist, and today I'm going to be painting this portrait, kind of a side profile portrait of a kind of a semi-nude model here who's turned to the side. And I've got a pencil drawing all set up already, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. And this is a brand new channel, and I'm really thankful that people have been watching, and I hope to create more paintings in the future. So thanks for watching, and if you like it, you can subscribe to it and to my channel, and then you can see more art in the future. So I started out with a side profile shot. This was sent to me by a paid model who is in Taiwan, who was very gracious to provide this reference photo for me. And I took this paper, and this is kind of an odd size of paper. Usually I use just the standard sizes that are easily framed, but I recently watched a mini documentary from one of my favorite painters, Tamara de Lempicka. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe I could have noticed from the documentary, but I didn't. And so this, Tamara would use these really elongated canvases, and I like how, it can frame the human form really well. And so I cut down this piece of paper to this size and put the model on it. And so there's a pencil drawing already there, and I created the pencil drawing through tracing. Just really lightly tracing from basically a computer screen projector type thing. And now I'm going to go ahead and get started in painting it. So the first thing I always do when I'm painting, I'm going to pull up the reference here. You're not going to be able to see it, but I'm going to pull it up so I can see it. The first thing I do is decide on the colors. Now, in the reference photo, the model is wearing this really lovely red, she's got this red cloth draped around her. And so probably the first thing I'm going to do is just block in that red cloth. And I just want it to be really bold. So I'm just going to get this. This is pyrrole red that I got going here. I'm just going to go ahead and block this in because it's pretty clear that I'm just going to stick with the red for the drapery. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. I wonder if you can hear the clock ticking behind me. And if you can, let me know if that's distracting or unnerving or whatever. I'm a clinical psychologist by day. That's my day job. And I was thinking, should I have a ticking clock in my office? And I did like a mini poll of my clients. Would this get on your nerves? Would you like it? And there were some people who said it would be soothing, but there were just enough people who said, no, that would get on my nerves, for me to say, okay, there's enough people who would get on their nerves to where I'm not going to have a ticking clock in my office. So I'm wondering if maybe it's the same thing for this channel. There are just enough people who would be very irritated by the sound of a ticking clock that I'm not going to have a ticking clock. I'm going to probably talk about this a lot in a lot of videos, but I started this with a pencil tracing. So I often start paintings by tracing the reference, and I've seen a lot of discussions on this, and there are a lot of artists who feel like that's cheating. And I'm going to explain why I don't think that's cheating. There are a lot of reasons, but A few of them I can mention are that, let's see, I'm going to pull the reference up a little bit better. Much better. Watercolor paper is fragile. So if you're drawing a reference and you're trying to sketch it perfectly and you keep erasing and erasing and erasing, eventually that's going to destroy the layers of the paper, even if it's really good paper. And the result is your paper is kind of destroyed and chewed up, and then it's not going to take layers of paint very well. So, you have to get it really, really right in very few passes. And that presents a barrier to entry to a lot of artists. I'm not a professional artist. I'm a professional psychologist. And so for me, I don't want this art to start with this epic task that's very easy to ruin. Second thing is, because I'm a psychologist, likeness is very important to me. Our brains are really sensitive to faces. There's a whole part of our brain that's just about detecting faces. And so if something's off just a little bit, our brains know it, and it doesn't look like the person anymore. And there are some artists who focus more on composition. They're saying that it doesn't matter if it looks like the model, it just matters that the painting looks good. And that's true for them. It's not so true for me. I like it to look like the person. And I think it's just my fascination with people. I don't like it to be a hypothetical person. I want it to be a real person. And so I try to get the likeness exactly right. And, with watercolor, you get the pencil drawing a little off. And then maybe you don't notice. You spend hours and hours painting a painting. Then when you're done, you look at it and you're like, man, that wasn't quite right. The pencil drawing wasn't quite right. But you put all the work into painting it. And so, to me, that's not fair. It's not fair that you can make a mistake at the beginning and then do really lovely work after that, and it doesn't matter. That's like a computer game or something where you get halfway through the game and you can't pass a checkpoint without an item that you missed at the very beginning of the game. It's not fair. It's not fair. That's happened to me in games before. So now I have to decide, okay, do I want the overall painting to be warm or cool generally? Because that'll affect kind of the colors that I'm using. So I think I'm just going to go with maybe a warmer overall palette, because I like the red of that and I want to really enhance the red. I want this whole painting to glow. I could go either way, but that's what I'm going to do today. So let's see. I'm going to start with some permanent orange. And I might soften it a little bit. Well, before we do that, let's get some pink in there. So this is quinacridone pink. And this is going to be a big, warm color. But it is skin tone, so if I want to soften it, I might add a little green. And for that, maybe I'll try some of this. And forgive me, I actually forget what exact color. I think it's like maybe Viridian, but it's a teal. It's like a greenish blue. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit of that to my palette, then mix it in really lightly. So then instead of this like really intense glowing color, I've got a more muted color, but that's okay because it's skin tones. almost like a tannish. I don't know. Okay. Now I'm just going to block in some shapes. I'm just resetting the, in fact, I'm gonna, you can't see what I'm doing here. I'm gonna take my reference and plug it in to I'm going to up the contrast a little bit. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right. And I'm going to use that. Turn off this light here. I'm going to use that to help guide these blocks that I'm about to make. And by blocks, I mean I'm just going to make some shapes in the face. Here's going to be one shape right here. What I like to do, this is just my preference as an artist. Even though faces are really important to me in my work, but I like it when you can break down a shape, break down a face into shapes, because you know, it's cool when you can maintain the likeness of a figure and still perceive all these shapes in it. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's how I feel. If you're wondering what I'm using in terms of materials, this is a Nick Runge brush. I really like his brushes and his work. I saw that he was selling kind of his own brushes and that they were good for multiple media, even though I mostly do watercolor. And I was, oh, well, I gotta get some of those. And they worked out really well. Looks like I'm gonna end up painting this whole side of the face. That's okay. Because in the reference, the whole face is in shadow. What I'm looking for in the reference too is those really white highlights, because you want to preserve those highlights, because you can't really go back with watercolor. Once the color's down, you can't make it lighter. You can make it darker, add more layers. Can't make it lighter, so once you, let's see. One thing I should have thought about before I started this channel is it's hard for me to do something and talk at the same time. Maybe this isn't such a good idea. No, I'm just joking. I can manage. just going to end that shape there. You can already see it's pretty warm. For now, I'm going to add some areas of cool colors, but it's warm for now. Okay. Now, a lot of watercolorists, they don't like these really hard edges. They want like more gradual transitions, and I do like those in some places. Like I can show you what I would do, maybe get some water. So right here in this edge, maybe I can soften that edge so it blends a little bit better. But for the most part, I'm not a fan of that subtlety. I like hard edges because it creates shapes. I like shapes. One of the reasons I created this channel was I didn't see a lot of watercolorists on YouTube that were painting quite like I was. And that can mean a couple things. One is that like there's a reason people don't paint like this. I hope it's not because this is not an inferior, this is an inferior way, but I just wanted to show something different. Even if there's somebody out there who, excuse me, maybe thinks this isn't quite the best way. At least it's a different way. You can just say, okay, that's not for me. The shapes of the nose are really important. So you can see, maybe in here, I'm really trying to preserve that highlight there. And I'm going to try to do this. Okay. Now here I do want a transition, so I'm just going to go like this. And just like blend it out. Okay. So far so good. Finally got some color there. Now because my color is a combination of permanent orange and quinacridone pink, I'm just going to add a little more pink and do the lips. I don't know why my voice is like this today. I have allergies. It's something I've had my whole life, and so. But anyway, okay, I'm just going to do the lips here. And it's just a different intensity of the same color I've been using. Just going to make sure it doesn't bleed into what I just did. Now, if I want to, when I'm done with the painting part, I can erase the pencil lines. Right now I'm seeing that some of my lips, I should have been more patient. My lips are bleeding out into the skin color, so I'm just going to use a paper towel to dab that. Okay. Just make sure it doesn't really leak out into everything. There we go. Okay. All right. I'm also seeing that the cheek is really rosy, so I'm just going to test this paper. Okay, it's pretty dry. You know what? I'll let it go for a bit. Okay. So now I'm going to zoom out a little and just take a look at the whole painting. I'm going to block in some more shapes over here. And I'm really going to define the collarbone. So this is partly for me, but I'm going to create kind of some shapes here that I can look at later. And this will be the collarbone. And it comes down to about here. Okay. And then there's a hard shadow created by that draped cloth right here. And I don't care if that bleeds a little bit because that's going to be really dark eventually. And then there's a shape right here. I'm just going to create it like that. In the reference, it's not as hard of an edge right here. And I'm going to create a little bit more of that shape here. Okay. And I'm going to use some water to just soften this edge. Just blend that down. Okay. There we go. Look at that. I like that. I like how that turned out. Okay. So this red is pretty dry, so I can start working on shapes down here, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm seeing that some of this neck structure, I kind of got it a little off. So I'm just going to be really, actually, why don't I just kind of correct that, because this edge is going to be like this. And I want to make sure that that's right. So I'm going to reshape that, and there's going to be a little bleed there, and that's okay. Now, this isn't exactly a mindfulness exercise that I'm doing. I'm not doing this as mindfulness, but there are lessons that you can take from mindfulness as you paint. So in this case, you want to be critical in terms of analyzing and thinking about what you're doing. But there's a line at which critical turns into just totally judgmental of yourself and really harsh on yourself. And that's not what I'm trying to do here. Because ultimately this is for my enjoyment. I'm not doing this because somebody's making me. It's not my day job. It's a hobby that I'm sharing with YouTube. And so when I notice my mind saying like, oh, you screwed that up, I just kind of notice my mind being critical, and I'm like, okay, thanks mind for trying to help. I know you're trying to improve my painting, but when you're that critical, it doesn't help me. It makes me feel bad, and it makes me want to give up. And so I'm going to let that voice pass. It doesn't help me. And then that kind of creates a shape here. Watercolor is a little hard to control. It can be. And I chose that for a reason, because in my case, I'm kind of a perfectionist in real life. I like to get it right, whatever it is. And so if I'm an oil painter, if I were an oil painter, for instance, that would give me lots and lots of time to go over my mistakes and obsess about each little detail. And there are some artists who do that, and they create some amazing work. But for me and my mental health, I can't be like that. I'm gonna just dab this up. So I want it to be a little more like that. I don't want to be super perfectionistic. I just want to have fun and enjoy myself and show you something that's cool. There's actually a little structure here. That goes all the way down to the shoulder there. So I'm just going to mark that structure here. And that is the collarbone. Just going to make a really light line there. I can see that that pencil line is not going to help me. It's a really hard line. So I'm just going to soften it like this. Now that that paint is okay. It's still there, it's just lighter. Okay, there we go. You can see how there's kind of like, there's no way to perfectly have a solid color, and that's watercolor too. It does this. This is the international symbol for it flows in ways that are not predictable. I'm just going to add some more pink and just look for areas of the skin that I see that are really warm and pinkish. Well, pink is a little cooler, but what I mean is there are certain parts of the skin where the blood tends to rise to the top, and I'm trying to identify those areas. So like right here in the neck, I'm really going to exaggerate that pink. Go like that. There we go. See that? It's pink. And then of course you get a little pink in the cheeks. So why don't I just start that whole thing going? A little peeking out there. There we go. There. I'm going to blend that a little bit, so let's soften that edge too. There. Let's hold off on this part because I feel like I might be overworking it at the moment. So I'm just going to do some pink here on the nose. Maybe here on the eyelid, this one right here. Let's put some color in there. And it's going to come on like that too. And let's see. Let's start to delineate the eye shapes here. gonna mix up back to the more orange-based skin tone here. And add in a little more of that green color so it's a little more lifelike. Now I'm gonna mark out some shapes here under the arm, and in the reference, that's one of the darkest parts of the portrait. So I'm gonna just create some shapes there and here. Let's first bring it around. And down like that. Okay. And then under here. There. And I'm going to do a real watered down color here that kind of goes out like that. And all I'm doing is just I'm perceiving little variations in value, basically. And the first pass that I do doesn't have to be too accurate. I can just kind of follow my intuition and just see what emerges. And whatever doesn't look quite right, if I'm light enough and subtle enough, I can just correct that in the next pass with another layer. And there's a little bit of color. I'm going to add a lot of water though. And it's going to go like this, kind of up towards the shoulder. Just like that. I'll fade that out too. Okay. So now I've worked on this area down here a little bit. And now I can go back up to the face and add a little bit more there. You know what? Actually, maybe I could do over here. I'm going to get my bigger brush. This is it's a round, and I can't even tell you the size because that number is worn off. I think I might have said 14 or something. It came in the set. Okay. So this is a fairly cool area, but a little dark too, so I'm gonna pull it down from the arm, and I'm adding a little bit of movement Actually, you know what I can do? I can do this. Pull it up from here. This is fairly dark along here. So what can we do? Add that in. And then basically fill this all in. Okay. I'm going to soften this edge there while I'm at it, because there's color all the way up to here and down. Okay, and actually there's a little bit of arm right here, so why don't I go ahead and do that while I have the colors mixed up. I'm going to continue using that color, and I'm going to make a shape that goes up like this, and then down like that. And I'm not going to make too much detail down there. I'm just going to kind of fade it out because that's not where I want my viewer's eyes to go. Okay. All right, so now I want to leave the whole body down there. Just leave it be while it dries. That's my biggest problem in art, is impatience, and if I try to work on it and add layers while it's drying, I'm in trouble. Okay, so now we've got the face up here, and the face, the basic blocks are starting to look good, but I'm thinking, okay, well, we could do another layer and just add in some more value. So for instance, this area right here is fairly dark, and the color is fairly neutral. But I'm just gonna do this. Add another layer. And I'll go ahead and soften that layer here. So do this. Like that. So it's more gradual transition. And I like, there's a little shape up here. So I'm gonna make that a little softer too. There, I like how that looks. I'm seeing some color here, so I'm going to add that in, but there's definitely a hard reflection there in the eye that I want to preserve. And the eyebrow, I'm going to fill that in later. Okay, and then here, I'm going to add a little bit darker, like that. And this is going to be really dark down here. Just stop that like that. So the nose is going to be dark here. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And then a separate piece here that kind of comes up and completes that shape. Okay. I like that. I always like to put in those cheek structures if I can, because that looks cool. Now I'm seeing that this whole area under the chin is dark. That's where the light comes down from here. It's creating a lot of dark here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, mixing up a little more pink and orange, and I'm just gonna pull in a little blue, or green, greenish blue. And how about I add a little bit more of that because I want it to be a little cooler. And let's do this. This is with a larger brush. And then under the chin, there's sort of a shape like that. I'm not trying to get that shape perfect. I just like it to be there like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. If it were a perfect reproduction, that would be kind of cool, but that doesn't leave much for me to say. It's just like here I have accurately reproduced this image and not this reveals something about how I look at the world. That's what I like art to be. And I'm gonna soften this edge a little bit, so I'm just gonna go over it like that. Okay. All right, it's looking good. We have this tendency in Alejandro Casanova. He's on Instagram, you can look it up. And he does online workshops, and he really taught me this. You know, we have this idea that lips are supposed to be like these big pinkish red things, and not just part of the skin of the face, part of the structures of the face. And, you know, we get that idea from lipstick. But the result, if we try to paint it like that with these big pink lips, is it kind of looks clownish or something. We don't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the darks of the eyes. And I'm going to do them the same way as the lips. I'm just going to create kind of a shade. I'm going to use this dark shade of the skin tone, and I'm going to do in these eyes because I don't want to overdo the eyes on this one. I can always add in more definition later, but for right now, I'm just gonna use the same colors I've been using for other things. I can hear my kids stomping around upstairs. I don't know if you can pick that up on the microphone, but cool. let's see, what's next? How about I go back down here because this area is now dry and I can start further defining shapes. Let's do this here while we're at it. Another area it's really tempting to make it really stand out, but it needs to blend in just like everything else. Okay. You don't want any one part of your composition really standing out unless it's intentional. So like, for instance, I really want this drape to stand out. To me, that's like a really important part of this painting. So, okay, let's keep going. So here's some more orange and pink. I'm really gonna work that in. It's looking a little too pink to me, so let's get some orange again. And I'm really gonna shade it. So this is darker now. Okay. And now I'm gonna really define the dark areas here further. And then later I can add some transitional shades and stuff, but I really want that shape here for now. And then out this direction, I kind of actually I like how that looked, so I'm just going to leave that. That was good. As Bob Ross says, that was kind of a happy accident there, so I'm going to leave it. Now I'm going to water it down and do a shade down here. And further define that like this. And then allow it to shade down here in the bottom. Okay. Now let's see. This area right here is very shaded, so I'm gonna really emphasize that. Okay, so I'm perceiving that this shade that I just created, it's kind of a dark maroon. It's going to be really useful over here on this robe. So what if I just started to do that? I'm going to be brave because I love how this red looks so much, but I'm going to be brave and start adding some shade to it. So I'm just going to look in the reference and see where it's most shaded. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here on my screen. Okay. And it's okay if I'm a little sloppy here. Because I want to capture the movement of the drapery. This is where I really start to feel like an iconographer. I do paint icons, Byzantine style, Orthodox icons. And those drapes are so important. Looks like it's not, you can't see it too well on the screen, but that's okay because this is just the first layer. And then this is really dark up here. And then, let's see, darken this, comes around here, it's like one of these. tonight I'm going to live stream. So this is going to be 2 paintings I'm going to do today. This is just the reality of me working a day job, and so today is Sunday, so I have to get in my paintings on the weekends because I don't have a lot of time otherwise. There's a really cool shape right here. I'm just gonna make sure there's something like that here. Okay. I'm happy with how it's looking so far. And again, watercolor's forgiving in the sense that if I go light enough and transparent enough, I'm pulling up the reference. Aha, okay. If I go light enough and transparent enough, I can always correct something on the next pass. Now it's really starting to look like egg tempera, or at least my technique is kind of going that way. Okay. So that's I'm gonna carve out this channel here. It's my first pass on the drapery there. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the face again. It's a good thing about doing a big watercolor is while you're working on this side, this part is drying, and that's what I'm looking at now. Back up here. So I've mixed up kind of a warm pinkish darker color, and I'm trying to see if it might be useful for the face. Yeah, I can use it for the lips and for some of the darker shades in the face. So let's do the nostril here. Okay. And then on the side of the nose, there's a shape that I want to get, but I don't want it to be too harsh. So I'm just going to do that. Just pulling up the reference here again. Okay. I can see myself on the screen and I can see how the painting looks, but then I have to get the reference too. Eventually I want to get a couple screens, so then there's no problem, but right now this is the operation I was able to afford. So for now, that's how it's going to be. Okay. And down here, there's a little bit of a shape. Okay. And let's look at the eyes. So, eyebrow. I'm going to soften that a little bit. This is what Nick Runge does. He uses his finger to kind of soften it. Okay. In the reference, the model's eyes are dark, darker than what I'm painting. And I'm probably not going to paint the painting quite as dark as what I'm seeing in the reference because I want it to be a harmonious painting. So at some point I'll settle on like what is going to be the darkest thing in the painting, and then that'll be the floor, the darkest thing. The the darkest thing. So this is a shape that's kind of a shadow. And I'm just going to pull it up here for the underside of the ear. And how about more of this dark color on the cheek? So we're going to do this. It's not going to go all the way. It'll just be like that. And I'm going to soften the edges of that. Cool. All right, I'm happy with that. Then there are little subtle things in the face that I want to make sure I capture. So I'm going to make sure I capture this part. Little contours and shapes. Like right here, there's a little bit of this. I want to make sure I get that. Okay, cool. Under here, there's a dark structure. And there. And under here. Gonna re-emphasize that eyelid there. Do some lines. Okay. So for right now, let's just leave the face where it is because I'm really liking how it looks. I'm gonna head, you know what, actually, I'm gonna leave this alone, but then I'm gonna go here under the chin because under the chin, it's cool and dark. And so I'm just gonna add one more layer here. And I'm going to blend that out a little bit more so that edge is soft. That ended up looking a little warmer than I wanted it to, but I'll fix it later. That part's still wet, so I'm going to leave it. Okay. Why don't I look over here for just a moment? And I can see some shade right here. And I'm gonna blend that. Add a little bit more dark there. And a little bit of dark here. Okay. Now, maybe I want to add a little more definition right here on this, right in front of the abdomen here. So I'm just looking at the reference and it's really blended in this area. There are not a lot of hard edges and I want to preserve that. So I'm just going to make a little shape here. I'm kind of just following the reference, these little tiny shapes, blending them in, but then more of a hard edge here. That's why you can see the pencil line, which I'm going to have to soften that later because that's just a little too harsh. And then reinforce this, and that might be as dark as I want that because I don't want that to be too too dark. And then what I see on the edge is a really dark, another shadow of that drapery. So I'm going to do this. Okay. Now, here's something a little darker, but I'm going to soften it like this with water here and here. So I want it to be more like that. And I don't want that edge to be hard, so I'm just gonna, yeah, that looks fine. Okay, just gonna make a little bit of a shadow here. Okay. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so now this area in the painting, it's looking a lot, in the reference it's really subtle. It's not, it doesn't have the hard edges that I've put in the painting. So I'm just gonna mix up kind of a cool shade here. And this is a very cool shade. Almost muddy, but let's just see what I can do with it. Really gonna follow that shape that I made. And pull it down like this. And this whole area is shaded. So this shade that I'm putting in is gonna tie together all the layers underneath it. This goes up here and then back down. And yeah, like that. See how that tied together all the layers that were underneath it? And it preserves the shapes that I painted underneath it too. And I'm gonna take that same shade and I'm gonna add some shapes here too that I see. Okay. Now, this shape that I created here is really harsh when compared to the reference. So I'm just gonna soften that edge a little bit like that. Okay. Let's create this. And then this collarbone really is a shade here. I'm just gonna put that in and emphasize this one right here too. Okay. I'm gonna leave that for now. And then move on to this. There's actually some shapes within the shadows. I'm gonna do that. How's this doing up here? Okay, I wanted to do another shade layer of that under the chin. Gonna add some orange and just a little pink. But this is a pretty kind of muddy color. And using my big brush here. And I'm just gonna do the whole shade of the face here. So I'm gonna do this. And once again, I'm tying together all the layers underneath. It's not quite as orange as it looks on the screen. Okay. And where do I want it? Up here. Probably gonna have just a very light wash up here. And let it sit there for a minute. Okay. Actually on the forehead. So I want to get the value right on that. The bridge of the nose there. Okay. Let's do this really quick. Okay. Now once again, I'm going to do another layer to tie all of this together. So and that's going to be like that. Come around like that. And there. Okay. This is going to be really light, but I want something tying all of this together like this. Okay. And if I just soften this with some water, it blends perfectly. Perfectly. All right. And let's do some of that over here too. Okay. Right now I'm just looking at the painting and just kind of seeing like, okay, what can I do to bring the painting more in line with this portrait reference? The whites of the eyes are not white. That's an important thing about portraits. Okay. And while I'm at it, finally, let's make sure this arm matches the tones of the rest. Okay, I think that might need to be red, but that's fine. Okay, so far so good. let's just take a break from the skin for a second. Now you might notice, what about this hair? Well, that's a good question. What about it? What I need to do is create a dark, almost a black, but I want it to be harmonious with the rest of the painting. So I'm going to use colors that I've already used and see how dark it'll get. Now, there are some real artists who would just look at it and say, oh, I know exactly what to put, but I don't know. I'm going to try to mix together the red that we used for the drapery and then the teal and just see what happens. Okay, that gets me a pretty dark color, so that's just what I'm going to do my first pass on the hair. There we go. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with the background either. I'm seeing these two paint colors don't play well together because I'm mixing them together and then they're separating on my palette. That's just interesting to me. I don't know what that means. I think an expert artist could tell me because they know all about the pigments and stuff, but I'm just using the dry edge of the brush to create some texture there. Okay. And she's got her hair up, so I'm gonna try to preserve that. Okay. That's still a little wet down there, so I don't want to mess with it. Instead, since I'm playing with a dark mixture here, I'm going to do another pass at the drapery. I keep calling it drapery. It's not like she hung curtains around herself, but I'm just going to zoom in here on my reference and just see how that looks. Okay. I'm just going to do another pass at the darks. So, like this. And this is just another layer, and it's much darker. It's careful work. And I'm not sure why I'm using such a big brush. It seems like asking for trouble, but I'm already started, so I'm just gonna go with it. I am trying to mimic the reference, but I'm doing it in a really loose way because I don't want to draw too much attention to that part. Then under here is dark area. And then this gets dark here. So I'm just going to let that flow a little bit better. Okay. And looking over here on the side, this is like a hard edge here. So I'm just going to reinforce that edge. And down here. It's really going to be dark there. Okay. Now I like this dark, and I'm going to add a little bit of orange to it to make it more like the flesh tones. Let's see. I'm just going to see what that looks like and if it might be useful. Okay, let's try it. Going to soften that edge there, just like that. Maybe soften this edge too. That one. I want a very light bit here to define that. I would like this to have a little bit more, oh, see, look at that. Just dropped a big drop of water there. That worked close one. All right. That looks like it might have been a little too dark for me. So first I'm going to try to clean it up with that, but I don't think it's going to work, so I'm just going to dab it out. That looks better, huh? Okay. Now I'm just perceiving that this area of the face in the reference is still pretty dark, and I've left a lot of it light, so I'm just gonna use the same shade that we've been doing and do yet another pass here. Continue doing that. Follow that out like that. And then this structure right here needs some definition, so I'm going to do that. And then use this brush to soften it up here. There we go. Not too bad. Not too bad. Except this isn't, I don't want this to be a harsh edge, so I'm going to soften that too. Okay. So, what are we lacking now? I'm going to make some more of our dark shade because I'm starting to like it. This time I'm going to add more of that teal color. I'm just going to do the eyes again. This time I'm going in really tight. In fact, I'm going to zoom in on my reference. And I'm going to really, this is basically like drawing at this point. Okay. All right, that's it. Not gonna mess with it. That's what it is. In fact, that might be the last pass I'm gonna do on the eyes. And then here in the nose. Find the darkest area of this nostril here. And then this right here. Okay. And then on the lips. Okay. Now I'm perceiving that the ear is fairly dark. And I don't want to draw too much attention to the ear, but I am going to put that in. Now I'm going to do another pass here. Let's see. Okay. That was still a little damp. I kind of regret doing that just now. I'm going to hold off on doing more of that. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is do another pass at the hair. Doesn't have much definition, and I want to see some structures in there. Okay. Starting to look pretty dark. And in fact, I might want to switch to this perylene green. So add some of that and it gets even darker, although that's a little more opaque, so I want to be careful. Okay. So I want to see some of the structures in the hair, like the forms. So I'm going to do this. And already I'm going to try to preserve some of the lighter areas. Because I can go over them later. All right, you can come back to that later. So I'm just looking over my painting now and my source painting, and I want to see, okay, see this cloth right here? It's time to do another pass of that, and I might use something very similar to what I was just using. Okay, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush so it can be a little more precise. Okay, and I'm really going to find those darks. Okay, so like here. I'm not sure you can see that on your screen, but they're there. There's a dark channel here. And ones down here. All right. I think we're getting towards the end here of this painting. I'm really pleased with how it's turning out. This edge needs to be softer. Just gonna go around it like that. Starting to look kind of Renaissance, right? And this is really dark here, so I'm just gonna put that in. Okay. And there's kind of a dark area here as well. And then this is dark down here. Okay. I'm still perceiving a little dampness there, and I don't want to disturb it. So I'm going to, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn off this microphone, blow dry it, and then turn the microphone back on. I don't want to blast your speakers, so hold on one second. All right, so now that should be a lot darker, or drier, and I can put in some darks here. So I'm going to do that like this. Okay. I'm kind of perceiving that this whole area needs better transitions. Let's get some warmer colors in here. Just going to use some of my pre-existing paints to define the edge of this again, and then this, like that. Risking overworking this, so I'm just going to let this be. Yeah, I can see I'm already getting some blooms in there. So before it really messes up, I'm just going to take the paper towel and just try to do that in a bit. Okay, now I'm seeing on the reference that I want this area to be darker too. So I'm going to, let's add some water just in case, because I don't want it to be too dark. I just want it to be just like shaded because it's in the shade. So. And I'm softening that. And that. Okay. Okay. I'm going to do another pass here. You can see when it goes down, it's really dark, but then every time I do a pass on it, I come back and it's lightened up quite a bit. That's just how watercolor works. This is actually quite dark. And this is dark. Okay. And I can see I've forgotten to do the eyebrows, so I'm just gonna zoom in and approximate the eyebrows. I'm not gonna try to do every little strand of eyebrow. Just kind of like the shapes, that's it. And I don't want it to stand out too much. Okay. Just looking at this arm, and I can see we need another layer here. Okay. There's a lot of looking and observing necessary when you're painting, so you got to stop and look at what you're doing and compare with a reference and see if you're there or not there. Okay. This is looking, so I'm seeing that there's like some really dark areas here and then lighter areas around, and there's not a lot of transition. So I'm going to mix up a color that represents that kind of transitional boundary right here. Make sure it's dry, and then use that to transition it better. Kind of like glazing, like you would do with oil color. I don't have a lot of experience with oil, but you know, glazing's a technique usually. that they talk about in oil. But you can do it with watercolor. It's one of the things I like about it. And in actuality, all this has a shade to it, so I don't want that to be completely... There we go. Here. Okay. Don't want to overdo that either. Okay. Okay. Let's get some more. To the blow dryer there, if you weren't seeing that. Okay, so I'm just looking at my painting and I'm seeing I want a little bit better blend here in the draperies. So I'm just going to get some more red and some of that teal color, and I've created just a slightly darker shade, and I'm just going to do another layer there and another layer here. Because I want that transition to be smooth, and each layer you put down kind of smooths out the transitions. This is all dark. As a matter of fact, it's all dark. Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave how it is for now because, well, I can see a little more of a transition here, so I'm just going to put that in. Okay. I'm seeing there's more that I could do with the skin here. Maybe I'll do one more transitional layer, but I'm starting to get worried that I'm going to overdo it. Because that's a real risk with paintings, is just overdoing it like that. I'm getting to the point in the painting where it's starting to look really good. I'm happy with it. And if there are imperfections, sometimes it's better for there to be imperfections than for the whole painting to be overworked. here. Okay. Now, how do the eyebrows look? They're almost there. Let's see. I'm going to really zoom in, and I'm seeing there's just a little bit more value here. And this is pretty dark here. Okay, and I'm not going to mess with that anymore. Now I'm going to do one more pass on the hair, and then I'm going to decide if I want a background or not. I think I do want a background, but I have to be really careful when I do a background, because the background you choose can really determine how the painting looks. Okay. So here's a really dark color. It's perylene green and pyrrole red. And I'm going heavy on the green there because it's nearly black. Okay, and I'm going to do some black here. And now I'm just going to outline the forms that I'm seeing. And I like to play it loose with the hair, so it doesn't have to be exact because it's just showing how the hair could look. Kind of like implying what it looks like. I don't even want the hair to look that dark actually, because now that I'm looking at it, you know, the painting is looking pretty harmonious. It's not black anywhere really. Oops. And I don't want it to be really black, because the closer you get to black in watercolor, the more you're starting to deaden your painting. I don't want to deaden my painting. This is actually a hairpiece. Gotta work on my mic placement clearly. Okay. All right. So, are there any like ultra dark places that I want to get in? I can use this color that I just made to get into some really ultra dark places. So I'm just going to do one here. See, I'm not even sure these will show up, but just in case. And right here is pretty dark. And here is pretty dark. And right in here. I keep doing passes on this, but I think this is going to do it. Okay. I'm just going to soften that just a little bit. Okay. Now, the dreaded background. Well, this is a fairly warm painting, and I don't want the background to be too loud. So I might choose a green. Well, you know what? I think green would probably clash with that red. It's a complementary color to this red. So what if I started with just a really light green oxide and just see what it does? What if I use the teal? Let's just try the teal first. That teal that I was using before. Yeah, that's not too clashy, complementary. So I'm just gonna do, so this is where I kind of have fun. Oop, there's a thread there, okay. And I like doing these backgrounds because you can really define the edges at that point. So I think what this is a trapezius, and then work it down like that. I want to make the edge a little rough. Maybe. Let's just see how it looks. Or I could go to the edge with it. That's what Tamara did. That's kind of how this is an homage to her. Okay, let's just try it like that. Now the other side, I'm gonna flip her over. Woo! Let's get some of that teal going. And then do that. Uh-oh, some of that dark color wasn't fully dry. I might have to fix that. That's okay. Okay. So I want this to be a really soft transition here because I want it to look like there's some movement in this direction. The light's coming from that direction, so I'm gonna really make sure that is subtle and kind of a nuanced transition there. Add a lot of water here on the side. But it's gonna go all the way to the edge. Okay. It's not a bold background, but I kind of want the emphasis to be on the figure, not the background. So I'm going to do one more of those. So I'm going to do blow dryer again, hold on. Okay, so what I'm seeing now is a very warm figure, a very light, cool background. And I think I want to add some complexity to the figure. And so I'm going to take this teal color and I'm just going to have some cool areas of the figure, and I'm going to accentuate the coolness by adding some of this teal. And so I do this sometimes. I don't always do this, but for me it's kind of fun because you can have a cool color peeking out. So I'm just going to look at the figure reference that I'm seeing, just see where the cool areas are. And I can already tell you right across the chest there's some really cool areas. So I'm just going to add a lot of water. And I'm just going to start like this. Cool, all right. So far so good. Okay, I'm liking it so far. Don't want to overdo it, but let's... I'm really liking that so far. I'm going to leave a little bit of a highlight here on the side. And I can already tell now I'm probably going to want a darker background just based on what I'm seeing here. Oops. Mix up some more. So this is a cool area right here. And that blue really, that teal really does it. And it's over here too. Cool shades. Soften the transition. And where are the cool areas of the face? I'm seeing up here some cooler spots. Kind of illuminates. And a little bit here too. And the whites of the eyes. Don't want to go crazy with this, but there are some areas that would really benefit from that cool color. Add some there. And then maybe add one full pass here. I'm so glad this was the right decision because I didn't plan that, and that could have gone either way. Hey, cool. I'm pleased with that. I'm really pleased with that. Okay. And then this whole part here is quite cool. So I'm just going to add that in and really exaggerate that coolness. Okay. All right, like I said, don't want to overdo it, so I'm going to focus back on the background. Okay. So I think what I want to do is just darken it and maybe add some texture. So what if we just did this? That's like a turquoise when you really saturate it. And same thing on the other side. So if you're watching this and you're an artist and you think, I would have done the background differently, just let me know. I'm curious, maybe some other ways I could have done this. I like how this is looking, but certainly there are other ways I could have done it. It's like some intense dry brush there. I get to be a little more saturated down here. And I like it to extend a little bit farther this way too. So. Now I'm just wondering, okay. Is that it? I think that might be it. All right, cool painting. I might tweak it here and there. Might add a few more tweaks here and there before I put it up for sale or whatever I want to do with it. But let's do this for now. This will be my last thing to do on it. And do it like this. All right, I think that did it. And finally, I'll sign it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I'm very pleased with how this painting has turned out. Could have done it better or differently, but for me and my skill level and ability, this looks just right. So I'm going to sign it, and that's it. Thank you for watching.